all set. Let's do it.
All right, with Amanda Minchin, Mary Kate and Johnny is the winning screenplay, play at the Female Film Festival. I love your logline teaser because it's when anybody who reads it, they want to know what the hell's going on. I'm gonna read it for you because you've obviously wrote it. A newlywed couple takes on a one-time gig to make ends meet and wind up creating America's very first sitcom in the process. Dot dot
Mhm.
dot, based on a true story.
Mhm.
That's a pretty great teaser to a screenplay because we want to know
Exactly.
what the story's about.
Tell you what the story's about, you said?
No, everybody wants to know what the story's about. So
Oh, I
what is the
know.
story about about?
Exactly. I was surprised. I heard about it randomly on a podcast, and everyone I've talked to in the film world, uh, no one has any idea that this story existed. And this is entirely something that, they they would grab onto, they would love if they heard about it. So I'm so glad to be able to get the story out there.
So it's based on these Mary Kay and Johnny Stearns. They're
Hmm.
Broadway bound newlyweds. They're living in New
Yep.
York City, and it's post World War II. So life is happy. People have been through a lot of trauma. The
Mhm.
economy's good, and then there's an invention called a television that only really
Oh.
rich people have, right? But it's getting there. And then
Mhm.
of course they need programming. TV needs programming, and then that's what starts the story, I guess, with this couple.
Exactly. And it's at a time when TV is in its infancy. There's, you know, uh, so few sets and TV sets in the US, and it was very hard to come by, but it was on the verge at the time of just about ready to become a booming business. Um, so it was the Wild West. People didn't know what to put on the TV.
Yeah.
And in walks in this couple, and they managed to get about 15 minutes of screen time and um, managed to get an audience going with it. Um, and it's so funny looking back because there's a lot of TV shows happening that you would recognize today. So one of my favorites was finding the alternative to Supermarket Sweep
Yeah.
happening in 1950. Um, but these two, they were told, okay, you have this time, do what you want with it. If it works well, we'll continue. And like anyone struggling for cash, they were like, okay, well, let's make this good. This is our first impression. Um, so, they were trying to figure out what to do, and they decided to talk about their own lives, but in the same way as radio dramas were doing at the time. Harriet and Ozzie, for example. There were a lot of domestic comedies that were happening on the radio, and they decided to kind of mirror their own lives in the format of that, but for television.
Mm.
And I mean, when they first started, there were more TV sets in bars than in homes. So the fact that it caught on as well as it did is insane. But to be fair, they took it over from someone who was trying to advertise dresses for preteens, so they could only go up from there.
Yeah. So that's how it worked
Turns
in
out
TV.
bars aren't the market.
No, gotcha. But that's how it worked with TV, where like it was a company had advertised the show, and
Yeah.
then that show would advertise that 15 minutes or half hour, and then they went from there. So then there's so much into because you mentioned radio. So radio had comedy shows, they had drama shows.
Oh yeah.
So it's just taking the radio storytelling aspect and turning it into visuals, the visual medium, right? So
Exactly. Exactly. And so what's really innovative about this is it's kind of like the first reality TV show because they're writing scripts that are fictionalized based off their lives. And then a lot of the, plots created these tropes that we now see in sitcoms today. So your young newlywed couple living in New York, uh, that all started here.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that happened. I guess there's been a thousand different versions of that story,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, yeah. But there's
Sorry, my cat's
something
not normally this chatty, but I guess right now is the
people. I
time.
don't know why we do a lot of podcasts. People creative people have cats for some reason. They have
Yeah, go figure. Go figure. We've got a little farm going on over here.
so so basically, there's something interesting about the pioneer times, right? Like look at the
Yes.
internet, for example, in the 90s where you just people were just doing they were just kind of figuring it out like as they went, and it was the
Yeah,
creators who were figuring it out, and then the executives or whatever were like we're going with what was happening, right? That makes sense.
exactly. I mean, we can
And
all, anyone who grew up during that time can still envision well, still hear the AOL dial-up
yeah. And then they
tone.
realized right away that people like community, right? So in the 90s,
Yes.
like people like chat rooms and talking about television shows and they loved talking to each other. And that was the seed of obviously social media, where someone
Yeah.
kind of jumped on that rabbit and said, yeah. And basically it's the same thing with the TV, right? Where you talk about the beginning
Mhm.
pioneer times where basically it's like we're doing this 15-minute sitcom because they're now it's half hour an hour. We're just doing these things and it's like, oh, this is working, this is not working, this is what people are responding to. And it's the advertisers are seeing what who's buying the product, I guess, right?
Exactly, exactly. I think they were expecting to sell the first episode. They were given these light up compact mirrors to sell. And the go-to was if you sell enough of these, we'll continue your show. They're expecting like maybe 50 of them to be sold, 50 people to write in and be like, yes, give me this compact mirror. And they got thousands of submissions
Yeah.
overnight. Um, and that's what continued the show, basically. Um, the other fun part about this time period, being the Wild West, it's right before the Hays Code of Hollywood makes its way to the small screen. So they could get away with doing some things in their plots that you wouldn't typically see. Um, for example, our main character, Mary Kay, becomes pregnant during the first season in real life. And so there was do we or don't we show? Do we say the P word? No. Um, and they just kind of went with it. And to the point where the day that she gives birth was a taping day. And they weren't able to feature Mary Kay, but the episode was basically Johnny outside of a waiting room, walking back and forth, anxiously awaiting the birth of his first child. Um, and, mirroring that to later sitcoms like I Love Lucy, where, that also happens to her. And I feel so bad for her. She had to go through, I mean, she basically had a planned C-section for the day to air in conjunction with the episode of her being pregnant
Yeah.
and giving birth on screen. So it's so crazy what a difference of 5 years in that early television space would make. I mean, heaven forbid they shared a bed on screen. That didn't happen until
Yeah.
the Munsters. Again, we had to have a couple being literal monsters
I
in
was gonna
order to
say
show
they're
them on
not
screen.
like human to be in the same, yeah.
Exactly. So then it's fine. Or animated. In the case of the Flintstones, that's okay. Um,
But if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, she couldn't even say pregnant, right? On level
yes.
Lucy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was, I believe,
With child?
expecting or something was the term.
Yeah.
Uh,
Expecting, I guess, right?
or I think I'd have
Yeah.
to look it up again, but yeah, it was just fascinating. Like, and I don't want to take away from the crazy milestones that shows like Lucy did, because I mean, obviously, uh, they're legendary for a reason. But these two, Mary Kay and Johnny, they completed a lot of those milestones and they're just not known for it. So I'm hoping with this pilot to help get them their due.
Yeah. And the reason why you mentioned it, you mentioned the blog interview, is that I Love Lucy, every single episode is you can watch it anytime. And
Oh
they
yeah,
refined it, they redid it, they reprocessed it. With these ones, it's like there's only one episode left, right?
exactly. And you have to go to New York City to see it. I want to say it's in
The
the
TV,
Paley
well,
Center.
yeah, TV museum.
Yep,
Have
yep.
you been
It's
there?
on
It's
my
pretty
bucket
cool.
list.
It's pretty cool. I've been there. I lived there for a year. I've been there a few times. It's pretty
Aha.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on my list to see. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I've been also looking for there's so little information on this show, and I come from a background of information science, so for me, not being able to find
Yeah.
info is both freeing and just unnerving. Um, so one thing I do have is a interview of them from the early aughts, I want to say, where it's just this old couple goals of them like, no, dear, it was this. No, dear, it was that. Oh, no, you remember. Oh, no, it was that. And they're holding hands. They're finishing each other's sentences. So I'm taking a lot of that interview with that dynamic of them together and kind of inserting that into the dialogue on the page. Um, and luckily, there's also some interviews with people who worked with them that I'm able to mine from as well. Um, I guess in a sense, it's freeing for writing. I'm trying to make it as true as possible, but not everything translates.
Yeah. No, but and so tell me about that. Like, you're accomplished reader. You even read like on the side too. You even do some script coverage
Mhm.
on the side. So you
Uh-huh.
understand structure, let's assume. You do,
One would hope at this
yeah,
point.
at this point you do. So, but in terms of like the research and this, and then obviously serving the story, so kind of filling in the blanks with like kind of like plot points that may or may not have happened, I guess that's the best way to put it.
Mhm.
So, what was your process of like? Because sometimes people over research, right? They like
Oh my gosh.
they fall in love with the research and then they never get right into the script.
It's so easy to do. You kind of just have to like force yourself to start and like make notes of, I don't know if that was around then. Double check.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
I,
gotcha.
I
Okay.
always start, yeah. I always start with the research and then I work until I feel confident that I could like add in more details and then try to add in sometimes as I'm writing to go back and look for more items. Um, it it helps that in previous positions I've had uh, time, a computer, and internet access, and access to lots of databases. So I've utilized that when things are slow to be able to go in and uh, look for things. I work in libraries primarily, and that has taught me how to do research efficiently. Um, and at some point, you have to stop.
Yeah. That's the whole point. You got to start getting writing on the script, right? So
Yeah, I'm a perfectionist. If I had all the time in the world, I would be sitting there, for years going over that. But then it doesn't get out there. So you just have to kind of put a hard stop to it. Not to say that you can't go back and look at more research. You certainly can and should. You should always be asking, like, getting input on what you're working on. But yeah, it's hard. It's very hard.
so then tell me about the structure though, because it's like you're telling this macro story with this micro couple, right? So meaning that it's an individual story about this huge kind of topic, I guess, right? And so meaning that
Exactly.
you could have made a story about the history of television, and but you told the way you brought the people in is that you're telling it from the point of view of these two characters, right? What they're witnessing as the audience witnesses, right? So it's a great way of
Exactly.
storytelling. Yeah.
I had a bit of an in with that. So the interview I was talking about, they basically asked them, tell us how this began. Um, and so I'm literally going not quite bullet for bullet from that interview, but I was able to plot it out so that the first episode is the first like 3 minutes of them talking about how that first episode came to be. Um, and doing a little bit of background research on top of that because memory is valuable. There's uh, we're only so good at remembering things from, God, that would have been 60-ish
Yeah.
years prior. So um, when they were talking about it, they made it seem very like, oh, and then we just did X, Y, and Z, and things happened. And so that's how this is formatted. Like things had to happen in the way that they did in order for this to happen. So in that sense, when you're doing something that's based on real life, it's really helpful to have the main character talking about how the events transpired. Um, because then you can see it not just in a chronological sense, but from their point of view, what was important.
Mhm.
So for them, it was important that there was a back and forth relationship that they were having with money and being struggling young actors. They were very heavily at first resistant to the idea of television because it was considered
Yeah. Beneath
lowbrow.
them. Yeah.
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 So coming at it from that, well, we were new to this business, we're struggling, but we need this, and this has popped up for us. I mean, them getting it has to be the first episode for me. And I've gone back and forth on that, but uh, based on the interview, how they got that first episode was just so incredible that it had to happen the way that it happened. Now, going forward with the series, what I would like to do is there are three seasons of the show, and each one is slightly different. So, in real life, the end of season one ends with the birth of their child, and then he makes an appearance in season two, I believe. So they're young parents in season two, and this is what's happening in their real life. And by season three, they've been going from station to station, and season three they are given people to work with. They're given a cast and crew, so poor Johnny doesn't have to write, direct, and act in every single episode. But in the interviews, he said that what happened with that was that the brilliance of the first two seasons imploded because there were so many cooks in the kitchen. So as far as structure, I would like for season one, two, and three to mimic their three seasons with milestones in their life that are literally happening to them and also happening to them in the show because that's just how they did it.
Yeah.
I feel it's almost like cheating because I mean, this is legitimately what they did. It's so rare that you can have a making of, I mean, there's elements when you're doing a making of a show that like are going to mirror, the show and the lives of the people. But
Mhm.
in this case, they so purposefully made it that way that it, it, it practically writes itself as far as formatting. I had it quite easy with this one with that, and that's not normal.
Gotcha. But you just written the pilot so far?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You've written
But
like you've it seems like your outline is it loosely outlined or like is your outline written out for season one?
season one, I have the arcs, I have a beat sheet, and
Okay.
I like to. I mean, that's the question you get asked with pilots. That's so different from film is you have to know what the possibilities could be
Yeah.
for it. Yeah. So a lot of times you only have the pilot, and then you're hoping that someone will pay you to write more than
Or
that
you go
pilot.
into a
But
writer's room and you kind of like start beating out the series, I guess, right? So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. At least that's typically how it goes.
Yeah.
Especially, I would be considered very much so a newbie writer. So, um, at least as far as a room is concerned. So, yeah, I don't think they would not expect me to have the whole thing written out.
Yeah.
They would probably tear it
Yeah.
apart and then.
But ideally you like this to be a TV show.
Yes, 100%. I want it to be a TV show that mirrors in structure the real life what happened.
Would it
I
be in
think we
black
owe
and
that to
white?
them. What is it?
Would it be in black and white?
Oh, I keep going back and forth on that. I want to do elements of black and white. I don't know if you've seen Kevin Can F himself.
Yeah,
Okay. They kind of do in that show this very different like the real life scenes and the sitcom scenes are very different, and I kind of
yeah.
want to mirror that.
I was thinking the
Um,
same thing. Yeah, I saw where you were going. It's like because
okay,
you can
good.
start going on into the sitcom into the yeah. There's so much to play with it, right? So
Yeah. And I think also WandaVision did that really well.
yeah,
Um,
for the first couple episodes, right? So
yeah.
yeah,
So kind of utilizing those models, I think would work really well for this. You don't want to do something like that unless it's gonna like actually work for the script and not be hokey. Um, but I think this would work really well for that.
yeah. And it's original content too, right? Where like
Yeah.
because nobody's seen the episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only people I haven't reached out to yet who are always on the back of my to-do list would be the WGA's library because I know they have some scripts, but I have descriptions of scripts and I have episodes that they talked about doing. So
Someone has them. There's somebody who has them, like a
I
girl.
know, I know.
They
I mean, the
they
fact
have
that
kids, right?
yeah, well, it's kind of like they're the American version of the Lost Doctor Who tapes. Like they're somewhere,
Yeah,
maybe. We'll see what happens, but if anyone knows where they are, let me
exactly.
know.
Right. Like you're related to them, right? So, but yeah. But there's something magical about that because you referenced I Love Lucy where they had the Lucy movie, right? And
Hmm.
but that's like it's already even if you don't know I Love Lucy, you do,
Oh yeah,
right? It's like it's already in
you
your
get the
brain.
feel.
Yeah, but it's already in the brain. Like my 8-year-old probably knows I Love Lucy, meaning that because it's
Yeah,
part of pop culture, right? So it's sort of like, but then this is brand new. This is all new stuff, right? So
yeah.
yeah,
And I should probably just caveat too, the reason we don't have as much of this is we don't have their content uh, is because TV at the time was not made for longevity.
yeah,
Lucy was the first one that started to make things from more of a cinematic angle for longevity, for across the country viewing at the same time. These guys were seat of their pants. The camera equipment was not as good, unfortunately. And then because they bounced from so many studios, the studio that they wound up, I don't remember if they ended with Dumont. I want to say they did, but the only defunct, now defunct, of the big stations at the time is where their content ended up. And then when that network was bought, a lot of their old reels were actually tossed, literally thrown into a river. So,
but but also what they did is that like old game shows and baseball games because they're trying
yeah,
to like they re-record they re-recorded the tapes
yes.
because they were being cheap.
Because they're like, oh,
They,
it's fine.
they just use the same tape from yesterday's ball game.
Yeah,
They just
yeah.
tape
And then we
over.
lose yesterday's ball game.
Yeah, and then everybody wants all these games, but they don't like or game shows or whatever, and they're not there. So that's what also
Yeah,
happened as well. It's
exactly.
people were frugal.
Yes. And I respect the frugality, but the conservationist in me is like, no, please don't do that.
But there's
Please
more
don't do
money.
that.
There's money to be made. They didn't understand the big picture, right? So
Oh my gosh, yeah. And that was one of the other things is Lucy, they uh I want to say her company bought the rights to show their material after it aired. And so they were able to make mint off of just reselling what they had already done.
mhm.
Um, I mean, it's the epitome of, I make a product, I continue selling the same product, and I'm not putting any more effort into it, but I'm making money at the same time.
Exactly.
So I can respect that.
Yeah. On that note, like fantastic, really fantastic script.
Oh,
It's I
thank
know you're
you.
getting other awards, but it should do well for yourself. It's like not only really well written, and it's got two characters that we really understand, but there's a historical aspect to it too, right? Where like
Hmm.
it's like we love that history that we don't know. We love like it's there's
Yes.
and there's so many parallels to today with the internet and like as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I always say it's it's the sitcom, America's first sitcom that nobody knows about.
yeah,
And that usually, you
it's a
know,
great pitch.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can see it on a poster, right? So yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And you know what? If you don't know about it, great, wonderful. You're so in the minority
yeah.
in this case, and please join us. Learn more.
Exactly. Well, I wish you the ultimate best success with the script, and let's talk again, either when it's made or just keep in touch and let us know what happens, and maybe we'll talk about another script of yours in the future.
Hey, that sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.